Nikola investor questions answered. Yeah, say technology lets investors ask questions. Sometimes they don't get answered and sometimes you don't want to wait. But either way, we're going to talk about them today. I'm Brian. Welcome to my Nikola weekend. Ooh, that almost hurts to say. So before we get started, a couple things. I'm not wearing a hat like in the thumbnail because it's too hot. And I have my fan on, so if the noise is problematic, let me know. But it is warm in here. It's a hot day. What am I at? Yeah, pushing 90, getting close there, so good times. Quick thank you to newest patrons, Chris T. and Michael Patterson. Thank you guys for helping to support the channel. So if you don't know what SAY is, it's a neat venture started a couple of years ago that allows investors to register their shares so they can ask questions and get them answered. So the problem with investor questions like these is that you get kind of everybody in the mix. It's better than just letting people call in and randomly ask who knows what question, because the company gets to pick and choose which ones of these to answer. But a lot of these end up being wasted opportunities, and I think some of them are genuinely terrible questions, but there are some good ones. So let's just cover some of them. And we'll cover some more, time permitting, and I'm sure the time will permit. When can I see Nikola on the road? I have never seen any of your vehicles in the street. Why? So, what street do you live on? Is the real question. There are tens of thousands of fully electric, battery electric buses on the streets, but I've never seen one. These are commercial vehicles. They run commercial routes. It's not like a regular car that just goes wherever. These, especially the early models, are in very tightly confined routes. Some of them are operating at various ports. Buffering. Some of them are operating at various ports, so you're less likely to just see them in the wild or at all. Some of them are operating in very specific cities. So not seeing them doesn't mean that they don't exist. So the answer to why is you're on the wrong street. When will you see them? As more of them get out into the wild. So, I mean, I wouldn't have wasted my big chance to get a question in front of the board with that one myself. What plans do you have to excite investors about what your company's bringing to the table? And do you have a plan to become profitable, and when? So this is a harder question. It's a better question, but it's a harder question. Excite investors? The problem with commercial transportation is it's not exciting. It's all numbers. It's all dollars and cents. You could love the vehicle, but if it doesn't pencil out, it's not going to happen. So excite investors, I mean, they could do demonstrations that are purely for show, like when Ford showed off their Lightning by pulling a locomotive. It's a party trick. It doesn't mean that the truck is good. Any vehicle geared correctly can pull a semi. Can pull a locomotive. So what could you do to excite investors? I don't know. I think having some investor days, having some shareholder days, some media days, I think those would be a big step in the right direction. But I don't know if that's something they're willing to do. They did that one event, but it was pretty limited in scope. So, and what is the plan to become profitable? They absolutely have one. But it's difficult. And I'm sure they will address that question. And the problem with this question is the answer you're going to get doesn't change because you asked it. They're going to tell you either way, and the answer may not be satisfying. So not a bad question, but not necessarily going to result in answers that really motivate you. Considering the number of EVs entering the market in the next several years, how is Nikola planning to differentiate itself to ensure long-term success? Tesla was first to market. Rivian secured a contract with Amazon. Ford has the capacity to ramp production quickly. Nikola has? Well, the answer is a semi. They have a semi. They have contracts too. They have customers too. You don't need an exclusive contract. If Walmart were to say, we'll go exclusive with you, Nikola could not provide enough semis, and then their pace would be tied to another company. There are enough orders. What is the differentiating factor? They don't need one. If you've got a truck, customers will buy it. Their only obstacle, really, is ramping. So, what does Nikola have? A truck. A truck. You don't need to differentiate yourself in order to be successful long term. Think of all the semis on the road. How are they different from one another? Now, one differentiating factor could be hydrogen, but that is still on the horizon, and I don't believe it's in any way critical to their success. How are macroeconomic factors like global supply chain issues and inflation affecting Nikola's ability to scale production and sales in the US and overseas? Well, considering how early we are in the ramp, I would say minimally. The answer would be minimally affecting them. If you need 5 kajillion batteries, it's a lot harder to get than 5,000 or 500,000 batteries. So it affects them, but less than others. And ideally, with their retail price being in the $350,000 range, $350,000 range, there is room to absorb an extra $10 or $20 or $1,000 on bibs and bobs. But semis, apart from the drivetrain in an electric or hydrogen semi, are not as complicated as some other vehicles. So, especially in the early days, this shouldn't be an issue. Now, mind you, I'm not saying this is a dumb question. It's not. It's a good question. But I just don't believe that a small production, a ramping production, will make that big of a difference. And especially when you consider the supply chain should be sorted out by the time Nikola is able to ramp in a year or two. The company reputation is marred from the Trevor Milton debacle, and there's been no other major news to reverse public opinion. How do you intend to restore current and potential shareholder trust in Nikola? By building trucks. It's very simple. By building trucks that are what they say they are. Does it do what it says on the tin? If not, no one will buy them. And if so, people will buy them. Then the only question becomes cost. And they can drive the price down with economies of scale. And that is, I believe, the absolute intention. So they're just keeping a low profile. I'm disappointed with that. I would like more news. I would like more excitement. But this is an intentional decision that they have taken. What are the biggest challenges the company is facing right now, and how do you plan to overcome them? Well, ramping. It all comes down to ramping. There are other challenges, but they're all addressed by an increase in production. The biggest challenge, they don't have enough operating cash flow. Ramping will help address that. They don't have enough economies of scale. Ramping will address that. They don't have enough cars on the road. Ramping addresses it. So I think all of it will help. Is there any chance of dividends in the near future? So this one, guys, what are you doing? No, there's not. No, there isn't. What are you talking about? Did you get into Nikola for dividends? If you got into Nikola stock for dividends, you were in the wrong company. This is a growth stock, not a dividend stock. When you buy into a dividend stock, you hope for, 5% returns, 8% returns, something exciting. But that's not why you're not here for 5%. If you're in Nikola for the hope of getting a 5% return per year, I would suggest you're in it for the wrong reason or you're in the wrong stock. This is a growth stock. All the money they get will be reinvested into growth for the foreseeable future. certainly 5 years, but I would wager 10 plus. Companies go a long time without paying dividends these days, and some just don't pay them at all. During Q1 call, you mentioned that the war in Ukraine, pandemic shutdowns, put new and additional pressure and uncertainty on the global manufacturing landscape. How's that changed for the company? I think that's addressed with the one we talked about earlier. They're not getting so many parts from these regions that it's an issue. And the shutdowns in Asia appear to be ended, or at least on hold. So things are moving. This should be all right. This feels like a better question for Google. What are the latest updates and progress on the hydrogen infrastructure, and what were the results of the beta testing that Anheuser-Busch conducted with your fuel cell trucks? This is a good question. I hope they answer this. If they don't, asking it wasn't going to change their view. That's a very big question mark, and we're all kind of waiting to see. Has Nikola ever sold any vehicles? If yes, how many? What strategies are in place to increase production and marketing? Is this a real question? So, whatever sales there are will be mentioned on the call. And if yes, how many? That'll be mentioned. That'll come up. What strategies are in place to increase production? Well, they're building an additional phase to the factory, and they're streamlining operations. And marketing. Marketing's not important right now. They've got more orders than they can fill. Marketing may become important in the future. But when it comes to dollars and cents commercial business, marketing is different and less important. If your vehicle is more efficient per mile, that's all you need to say. You can put it on one piece of paper. You can take out a half-page ad in a trade magazine and convey that message. As long as the numbers work, it works. And if the numbers are close but not the best, which is very likely, you can't always be the best, you can still say, well, we've got models available in 2 months instead of 6 months, like some of the competitors. So, I'm not sure if this is a serious question or not, but now, important to remind everybody, have you heard they're less than 0.25% away from passing Proposal 2? Vote now. Trevor Milton has decided to vote against Proposal 2, which would expand the number of shares available. This is an effort to make it possible to raise more funds in the future, and it needs to happen if the company's going to survive. I think Trevor's playing a very dangerous game of chicken, where he's willing to burn the whole thing to the ground. And I suspect there's some kind of backroom dealing where he's saying, give me a hold harmless and I'll vote for it. Agree to pay my legal fees or my settlement and I'll vote for it. But that's very dangerous. If this doesn't pass, Nikola isn't dead, but they would have to borrow money instead of issue new shares. And borrowing money could be, in the long term, better for investors. It's tough to say. It'd be unlikely that they would get extremely favorable terms at this point, but not impossible. So let's actually go into the chat real quick. We'll go back to the say questions because there's a bunch we can address. One of the questions I saw early on was, is there any sort of benefit coming up in terms of government money, DOE, any of that? Well, the new bill, the EV tax credit Senate bill, commercial vehicles that weigh over 14,000 pounds are eligible for a $40,000 tax credit, or 30% of the vehicle, whichever's less. That is a huge benefit for Nikola, because they don't sell anything under 14,000 pounds. Well, I guess their merch store has some stuff. That'd be a big hat. So that could be very helpful. Let's look in the questions here. Dishy must be too hot. Yeah, I'm having some buffering issues today. I'm very sorry about that. I think it might be my computer and not my connection. I was hoping to have time to reboot, but I was getting everything together. What is the near future? 2050? Maybe. Maybe. Yeah. JJ says, bruh, these questions, though. There are some good ones in there, but there are some. I mean, when will you pay dividends? Oh my gosh. Do they mean marketing the vehicle or marketing the stock? Oh, I don't know. I assume they meant marketing the vehicle. Milton is the worst. Yeah, he's pretty terrible. He's, I can see coloring outside the lines to protect your company, but he's coloring outside the lines to burn everything to the ground, and that feels really, really ugly to me. Greenpad wants to know if we can get periodic updates on the new Panasonic battery plant in Kansas. I have some ideas on that. Tesla Semi doesn't even exist yet, so how are they first to market? No, they meant EVs in generally. I assumed they meant EVs generally. If they meant Tesla Semi, then that's a weird one. Yeah. Yeah, these aren't even Nikola competitors. No, they're just EV companies. I don't think any reasonable person could deduce that Rivian is a direct competitor for Nikola. They make a truck, an SUV, and a transit van. Those are all important vehicles in the electric segment. None of them are semis, and none of them can replace a semi. Oh, Mark. Mark says they can excite investors by having one run uphill. Come on, man. The Trevor Milton days are in the past. Oh. Okay, let's see what else. Okay, so I did want to go over to... Well, I might as well thank my patrons real quick, because you guys are the absolute reason this channel is able to exist at all. So thank you guys for the support. It absolutely means a lot to me. So let's look at ones I haven't looked at, because there's some doozies in here. Because remember, as long as you can prove that you own shares, you can ask questions. I'll get there. Yeah. Big challenges, and how do you plan to overcome them? The cost is too high. They'll overcome it by scaling. There's not enough on the road. They'll overcome it by scaling. There's not enough operating cash flow. They'll overcome it by scaling. It's all about the ramp. Dividends. Come on, man. What is the future of Nikola? That can't be a serious question, right? What is the future of it? Oh, gonna make some trucks, gonna sell some trucks. Yeah. They're expanding the factory? Yeah. What can we expect from Nikola in coming months? That vote needs to pass in the short term. What can we expect? We may expect to see some hydrogen announcements. We can expect to see a lot more trucks rolling out. If you've watched Bear's Workshop, and if you're here, you probably have, you can expect to see those cabs turned into trucks and shipped. What can you expect in the next 2 to 5 years? That. More trucks, more shipments. Have you considered that the real value of Nikola lies in building the hydrogen network rather than the trucks? I imagine that's something they've considered, but building a hydrogen network is extremely expensive, prohibitively. They may be working on, they're working on some of the tech to improve the hydrogen process. They could be working on that as part of a strategy that they would license it or partner. But I don't know if they would be ready to announce something like that on this call. Is there any way for your company to become profitable in the next 3 years? So I'm going to say no. It's still a very new company. Look at how long it took Amazon to become profitable, or Tesla to become profitable. 3 years for a startup, and it's really still in startup phase. They've just started deliveries, is an unrealistic expectation. yeah, they may see some decent cash flow, but a profit within 3 years is very unlikely to me. Would your company be delivering trucks to any big companies in the next few months? I expect to see an announcement on that. Are you still going to proceed with the power sports division? I'm going to say that's on hold. That is absolutely on hold. And I'm going to say that probably never really existed. That is from the Badger days. If Nikola were to receive an order for, say, 500 trucks, how long would it take for them to be built and delivered? Well, I'd say they have orders for 500 trucks, so a while, a year or two. I mean, it's tough. If Proposition 2 is passed, we'll use the extra shares for capital immediately, diluting the stock, or on an as-needed basis. I actually think that's a great question. If they just do a little bit at a time, they can probably get more bang for the buck as the share price increases, if that's something that they believe it will do. I know the company doesn't like to discuss Trevor, but considering the fact that he is a majority shareholder, I mean, he is the largest. He's not a majority, but he's the largest, and has such influence on votes that your shareholders meeting has been adjourned 3 times. What can you do to prevent this from happening in the future? Nothing. Nothing. He's a stick in the mud, is a very polite way to put it. Yeah, he's got a dark heart, and he's mortgaged his soul too many times. And, yeah. What are your plans to change the public image of the company? Just build stuff and do stuff. Just execute on the plan. What is the price? Oh, isn't that a Google question? About 350-ish is my understanding. Somebody in the chat can tell me. Yeah. JJ says, profit? Remember how long it took Tesla, my guys? It took, what, 15 years? And there was a good 10 years in there where the stock was just flat. So, one question is, how far in the hole are you? Is that a question for Nikola? I am not a Nikola shareholder, so that question I don't think, apply to me, unless you're asking about my other investments, in which case only 2 of them are doing all right, and one of them is Tesla. And the rest are taking a whooping because I naively convinced myself that I am smarter than the experts, and I am not. I have to stick with what I know. What's the next plan? Any update? Yeah, that's what they're going to cover, my friend. That's what the call is about. You wasted your question on that, my friend. What are you... How far along is the hydrogen infrastructure? Quality. What about battery development and power systems? I don't know how much of this they would go into because it's kind of secret sauce, and I think they're very wary of making statements that could come back to bite them if their understanding today turns out to be inaccurate. I don't think they would go as far as to outright lie. A lot of companies do that. I've seen so many we've got a new battery that's going to get 3 times the mile range. No, you don't. You don't. Is a conventional fuel crisis helping generate more sales leads? Oh, it's got to, right? It's got to. But the problem is they just don't have the capacity to build until the next phase of the factory's done and equipment is installed, which is, I mean, you're talking late next year at this point. Will you ever produce an affordable battery and motor to compete with Rivian or Tesla? For vehicles that want to be changed electric, converted, there will be a large market for that eventually. Too far in the future. Too far in the future. So, yeah, what will you do with dead batteries? Recycle them. That's a Google question. Have you partnered with any companies in the U.S.? Lots of them. Lots of them. Look it up. What will be the estimated net worth of the company? That's a crystal ball question. No one's going to answer that. So, yeah. So let's jump back into this this potential zone of regret. If you guys bone me. Down 69.69%. Nice, Tears. All EV is way better. I agree. I am not a fan of hydrogen for all the reasons, but I've said that before. Remember, a wise man, bald, once said, "It's impossible until it isn't." I'm thinking about putting that on a shirt. Just need some good graphics. Yeah, Jeff. Jeff says, just deliver it. Yeah, that's how you undo all the problems. That's how you address almost every question is just got to build them and ship them. That's it. That'll restore confidence. That'll let you see them on the road. That'll improve cash flow. That'll improve parts prices. That'll fix everything. I own Nikola, but I don't know when they will ramp enough to move the stock. The stock market is not always tied to reality. Am I invested in Tesla? I am. Sorry, I meant Nikola. I am not. I'm not invested in Nikola. Arcimoto is the only other transportation stock that I hold. And Palantir is the only other individual stock that I own. What a mistake that was. And then I also have ARK-K, which is not doing great, and Triple Q Invesco to just stick with the market. This is why Wall Street laughs at retail. Yeah. Well, a lot of the Wall Street questions are really, really dumb too, depending on the company. And you have to wonder, who's paying these guys $300,000, $400,000 a year to analyze this stuff? It's pretty ridiculous. Ugh, so much buffering. I apologize. Okay, I think that's probably all of it. People forget these questions are meant to be for what happens between Q2 and 3. Absolutely. Absolutely, JJ. Okay, well, this has been a reasonable success, I suppose. If I've got any questions that I missed, by all means leave them.